Joining me on the big story is Dr. Sylvester Kugonza. He's a policy analyst. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Would it be right to say that when you look at a country like ours, which is still considered a third world country, some indices will tell you we are considered a failed state, and several others around us, that the problem has a lot to do with governance, the way leaders for that matter, and here I'm not just talking about politicians, but even the technical ones, are not doing as good a job as they should. Would it be right to think so?
Not quite. Every developed country was at some stage like us. But some things changed and transformed those particular states into what we are now admiring as developed countries. So there is nothing like failed state. It is just a stage of development that countries, individuals may have to go through.
Are you saying that you are comfortable with the way we are? Because I totally agree that, yes, it takes quite a bit of time for us to get to a certain place, but at what pace? Doctor, if I set off and I decide that I'm going to Mbarara and I leave today, the journey should be, if you're doing a fair speed, 4 to 5 hours. Yeah, and 10 hours later, I'm in Masaka. I'm actually headed to Mbarara. I'm making progress. 20 hours later, I'm still far away from Mbarara. I'm headed to Mbarara, making some progress. But at what pace?
Yeah, anytime you find somebody saying, I have made enough success, or I'm comfortable where I am, you know that the decline or the demise or the fall of such a person has come. Anywhere, anybody, any country is striving to be better tomorrow than it is today. And all the efforts should be geared towards improving the current status. So ours happens to be at some level that is quite undesirable, but still doesn't mean that we fall into apathy. We have to strive to find ways and means by which we can do better tomorrow, so that what we bequeath to our own children in the future will be better.
I don't know whether the problem would be us lacking, knowledgeability of what we should do. I look at a country like Rwanda, and look, in my opinion, it has, several other challenges and so on, but there's many things that they are doing right. You see, as a civil servant, you're given a contract, there are KPIs, key performance indicators, you have got to deliver on them, things like, the exsanguination of the economy, siphoning, if you like, corruption in a country like that one, it is not heard of, because they put systems in place that make sure this does not happen. You fail to deliver, those are the other things. You fail to deliver as a civil servant, you are fired. Why is that so hard for us to do in this country?
Yeah, each country, even individual, has strengths and has weaknesses. You point to Rwanda for those elements, which could also be debatable, but we also have our own strengths and we also have our weaknesses. But one of our weaknesses, clearly, and this was identified even by the government, and the president has been talking about it, corruption. Because corruption interferes with service delivery. The bottom line of any system, must be very clear. For a private firm, the bottom line is profit. That when you invest, the costs are offset by the income and you have profit. Bottom line for government, bottom line for public agency is service delivery. When you have invested all that, what did happen at the community level? Did people experience better health services? Did the police services get better? Did the children get better education? It is not in other forms. The bottom line is what happens at the ground level, where the communities live and whether they access the services in the quantity, in the quality they deserve. And most importantly, because for the rich, they can access services in Uganda, in Kenya, in America, in the US. The bottom line is more to do with the poor, who don't have as much options as the rich. That village, that sub-county, that parish, if they want certain service, is it forthcoming at the right time, in the right quantity, and responsive to their needs?
It's interesting how you enumerate the challenges as they are.
Yeah.
They are obtrusive, they are obvious. How do we move away from this? What should we do?
So, in the aspect of corruption,
generally, not just corruption.
Particularly that one,
many other challenges that we grapple with.
Because we also identified it as one of the major bottlenecks. Actually, what was worrying that there is a general apathy, that this thing can't be fought. And once you have general
and you also had some people say that it's actually not necessarily bad for our economy. It, in a way, bolsters progress.
It was said in
of course, that's preposterous.
In the same studio. Actually, it even came up as we were discussing there at Imperial. Yeah. But if you use my analogy, tell me, if any farm, including this one where we are, if you are supposed to have bought these cameras to pick pictures and project them as they are doing, and somebody buys poor quality cameras and the projection there is bad, tell me how that helps to improve the performance of this company as far as its bottom line is concerned. That's the same thing with the country. If you are interfering with the bottom line, there is no way you can point that corruption is advantageous. What it could do, it can increase the quantity of something, where the money that should have been for the road, it has turned into some skyscraper for certain individual. In terms of aggregating growth, yes, it has been there. But what about the road, which serves the public good? So growth, which I think somebody was vending here, is not what we are talking about service delivery. It is not what we are talking about development. Development is about services there to the people who consume them. Development is quality of life. Development is for the bottom, the people at the bottom. That's development. So you can have numbers, but numbers don't say much about development. Two, there was also an argument that actually corruption could engender growth and then therefore development. But what they miss, the point they miss is that two things sitting together does not mean that one is causing the other or the other one is the cause of the other one. For example, if we are poorer and got richer, it means that our resource envelope has grown, the people involved in handling it have increased, but our systems have not coped up with this new challenge. And so there will be leakages here and there. So when you see the leakages, you start saying, I think the leakages are the ones causing the growth. That can't be. The growth is the one which has now exposed that the system is not working, and it manifests as corruption, and somebody mistakes it that is the consequence of the development, of the growth, which I totally disagree. And I would want somebody to come here and disapprove that and prove to us with evidence that actually corruption engenders development, not necessarily growth per se.
Doctor, this brigandage, I like to call it brigandage. You know, when we keep using this word corruption, it sounds, like a nicety at times. We've used it too many times, and it's not a big deal. You know, what I think is it's theft, it's brigandage, robbery. But look, we have got the IGG, the Inspectorate of Government, we have got the Auditor General, we have got the Solicitor General, we have got the Ministry for Ethics and Integrity. We have all these structures in place. How come they're not working?
Yeah, first, I take on the definition of corruption. Corruption being something that is in every society, developed and developing, the way it is defined differs. And I think in this country, we haven't got a proper and agreed definition of what corruption is, even if the law may spell it out to be in a stern way. And I think that was borrowed definition from somewhere. Because there are certain things which are done in other countries and not construed as corruption. And there are things in this country our citizens don't construe as corruption, but the law does. And the moment it is not written in people's mind that this is corruption, and therefore may be called theft, then they won't react. For example, down in Owino, when you are identified as thief, even if they don't know what you have stolen,
even if they're not sure you've stolen.
Yeah, the verdict is out. But when they say he's a corrupt man, it may even be some kind of, you may even have swagger for some cases. I saw one politician who was being released from prison around allegations of theft, actually, of public funds for a road. And as he was coming out and the jubilation around it and the thump rising that was around, I mean, if you're engaged in such an enterprise and you are getting such kudos, why would you stop?
As of 2010, we were told by the World Bank that this country loses about 500 billion shillings on an annual basis to theft. What's the estimate now?
I don't have the figures.
If you were to estimate, I imagine it's a lot more than it were in 2010. We have seen too many a case, even to date.
Yeah, certainly even what gets captured is very little, because you have petty corruption going on, stealing a pin here, some Panados there, and so forth. Then you have people stealing big money which was meant for the road, and then they build themselves something else. Then you have diversion of resources in a grand scale, and there is very large extent of state capture, where even the legislation is done only for the few. The whole parliament sits and passes a law that is aimed at benefiting only a certain category of big people. And that's what we see in fisheries, what we see in contract, awarding contracts. So the getting the quantity, measuring corruption is a big challenge. And no one can deceive. We just make estimates. Real quantification of the cost of corruption, what we actually lose in real numbers, is hard. And that's why even I challenge sometimes the measurements by Transparency International, just a perception. If people have given up on corruption and they think it is okay, you're going to get people saying, we are okay, and therefore our rankings just go up. If we are continuously exposing it and people are thinking about it, then suddenly they say, we are very corrupt, and the rankings now deteriorate. So, and you play a role, you in the media, and somebody in this conference even pointed out that the media may also have been captured, that you also have been co-opted in the corporation in the corruption enterprise, and you report on certain things and in a certain way, and you don't give us the correct picture.
But we are hosting fellas like
and you miss,
to talk about the
you are right. We had an international conference, 50 countries represented. So what I'm talking here is not necessarily what was talked about Uganda, but what was being talked globally.
I do hear you. Doctor, there are people out there that think maybe sometimes we extrapolate this a lot more than we should, that a country like Uganda grapples with several other quandaries, that corruption is not the biggest challenge that we do have. We have governance issues, we have issues to do with service delivery. Well, maybe they are tethered, in a way to corruption, but to an extent. But some will tell you that, look, we have several other challenges that we need to be grappling, that we need to be facing head on. Corruption, yes, is one of those, but maybe it's not the biggest that we should put all our focus on it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. There are many other things. But as I told you, when you run an enterprise, and whether that is state or private, your focus should be on the bottom line, service delivery. And so we looked at themes that help public policy reforms. And public policy reforms are about governance, because governance are processes that enable to do the bottom line. So if the processes that have become practice are not helpful, they are obstructing service delivery, they are slowing it down, then you do a reform. And for example, the allocation of foreign exchange. We had chosen as a country to allocate it because it was scarce. Then a decision was taken, and when it was being allocated, there were windows, there was a black market, there was Kibanda, and so forth. And the decision was made that no more allocation. Let the market decide. You bring your money, sell, and others buy. And now it is inconceivable that you can attempt to be corrupt as far as allocation of foreign exchange is concerned, because the conditions that made it, the processes that we had put in place to enable that to happen, went off. If you look at Uganda Revenue Authority, the way revenue collection was arranged, internal revenue and the Ministry of Finance and customs and Ministry of Finance had to do many other things. This was one of them, and it was not clear whether they were doing it well or not. We said, no, as part of reform, let's focus this function to a single agency, Uganda Revenue Authority, and assign somebody to head that one. And we are lucky that that reform which focused on revenue collection, that reform that gave a single person to spearhead that one, that the administrative reforms that were undertaken within that entity helped to improve the bottom line for Uganda Revenue Authority. We
And
get, in 10 years, we get 300 and something % increase in the revenue collection. And we could have that in every public enterprise if we focus on the bottom line, first do the public policy reforms, do the administrative reforms, get the right leadership, do the commitment, improve the processes, and the processes are the governance.
I'm afraid we have to cut this, but thanks so much for talking to us.
Yes.
Keep doing this.
Yeah, we shall continue. What I do is that as this conference has just ended, we have all these issues, part of it have just shared, but much more was actually shared.
And we'll keep following up.
And we shall have to disseminate them, and I hope you'll give us another opportunity.
All right.
Watch out in our journal, Uganda Management Journal. Watch out in the newspapers. We shall be releasing elements of what we agreed on. And thank you for hosting us. It is always a pleasure.
Coming up is my opinion. Not too long ago, I did read somebody's bumper sticker, and it had an interesting inscription. Don't act stupid, we have politicians for that. On further inquiry, I realized this person was just aggravated that many of our leaders in this country are rapacious, they are greedy, they are thieves. But is it just our leaders that are greedy? Are we not in our small ways? Because you see, when you keep talking about corruption and theft and that kind of thing, sometimes I think we extricate ourselves, and yet we are part of the problem. And maybe our leaders should take center stage at this, and they should spearhead the fight against this, because they are the bigger culprits. But we need to focus on us too. I think that to stamp this out, each and every Ugandan needs to be involved from the core. Can we do this? That will do for today's edition of The Big Story. Many thanks for joining us. Coming up in a bit is Everyday Life.